International relations. Why do people think the way they do? Some people espouse the need and importance of intergovernmental organisations like the UN and EU for making the modern world, whilst others see them as useless organisations that actually do relatively little. To understand why people think this way, we first need to look at the global governmental system and the challenges facing the global community, and then go deeper, examining the different ways people view global systems. The modern system of intergovernmental organisations such as the UN and EU that represent the core of global politics are all underpinned by the Westphalian state system. This is the idea that all states are sovereign, possessing the right to independently govern over their territory and their people. Importantly for international relations, it set out the idea that no state could intervene into the sovereign affairs of another, and that all states, no matter their size and relative power, are equal. As such, it laid out the idea that no body could have higher authority than a state. This idea is important to remember throughout the international politics section of the A-level course, as many subjects are underpinned by the Westphalian state system, so it's important to remember. We can see how Westphalian principles have shaped global governmental organisations when looking at institutions like the UN and comparing them to similar structures at a national level. Those governing a state have a great deal of power inside that state, being able to formulate laws, govern, and take important decisions. Most national governments gain this power legitimately, gaining the consent of a population to rule through an election. These governments then draw their power through institutions such as Parliament, which have the respect of the people and are seen as a legitimate decision-making body. As such, we can say that power in national politics is concentrated in relatively few bodies, who have the power to rule over that state as they are sovereign. On the other hand, global politics is much less centralised, as there is no single world authority, like there is in a state. Global politics is instead conducted through a number of groups such as the UN, EU, and G7. It is important to remember that global politics is much more multidimensional than national politics and includes many more actors. This includes non-state actors, which encompasses a wide range of groups from terrorist organisations to charities, all of which have a role in the international government system. However, even with non-state actors playing an important role, states are still the most powerful in the global government system due to their position as a sovereign entity. However, it is important to remember that states have a varying level of influence on the global stage. Powerful countries, such as the US, China, or UK, have a great deal more influence than countries such as Serbia and New Zealand. Powerful states are generally able to ignore or defy some attempts at global government if they want to. Remember, global politics isn't the same as global government. States are sovereign, and nobody can technically command them to act in a certain way. Some bodies may have regional or even global authority, but often possess very little power to force its members to do anything, as states can simply leave, as the UK did with Brexit, or just ignore the body, as Poland did when the EU demanded it to change some of its laws. This structural difference makes responding to challenges harder at a global level than a national level. Tackling problems like climate change will require a global approach. However, coordinating this is challenging when considering there are 195 states in the UN, as well as a number of semi-recognized territories and non-governmental organizations that need to be taken into account. In the last 2 decades, the global political system has come under significant pressure from issues such as Syria, where the UN has struggled to find a long-lasting peaceful solution, to the 2008 recession, which highlighted the downsides to a global economy, and Brexit, which put the world's most powerful regional body under significant pressure and led to the departure of the second largest economy in the bloc. To deal with these problems and many others, such as global terrorism and climate change, many believe that the international community will have to put aside its differences and work closely together. When this video began, I said we would look at why people think the way they do about global politics. For A-level, we will look at two contrasting ideologies on how the international system works. These are realism and liberalism, both of which will be getting a dedicated video in the future, but for now, let's take a brief look. The fundamental difference between realists and liberals is how they view the role of the state and its importance relative to other actors within the international community. As a quick disclaimer, it is important to remember that liberals in the international sense are not the same as the liberal ideology you might have studied in another part of the A-level course. While there are certain shared viewpoints, they are focused on different things. So when writing about liberals in the international sense, make sure you don't get them mixed up with the ideology you studied earlier in the course. Also, a quick exam tip. Remember to include details about the key thinkers you looked at in the ideology section when looking at realism and liberalism to get good marks. Realist and liberal ideas can be related to certain political key thinkers, and this is needed to get into Band 5 on the mark scheme for questions related to realists and liberals. Anyway, back to the two ideologies. Realists believe that the international system is combative, where a state's behaviour and actions are driven by self-interest and a desire to gain power, a currency that realists believe to be limited in the international system. These beliefs come from a pessimistic view on human nature, which they then apply to states, believing them and people to be immoral. This lack of morality leads to conflict in the international system in order to gain power, this as is often seen as being in the national interest. We can relate the views of an anarchic world order with constant conflict to the idea of Hobbes. Liberals, on the other hand, believe that states and people are naturally cooperative, and thus believe that states will work together to achieve greater things than they otherwise could do alone. This optimism extends to an idea of universal morality, which binds states together and represents a much more positive view on human nature when compared to the amoral nature of realists. Unlike realists, which desire to hoard power, liberals are instead keen to disperse it between both state and non-state actors, as they believe that having a more equal dispersion of power will lead for greater cooperation in the long run, rather than conflict, thus creating a strong international system, something that liberals desire. However, it is important to remember that that doesn't mean they are pacifists, as they are often willing to justify conflict on humanitarian grounds, but not on national interest. However, even this is seen as a last resort, and it shares the principles of limited conflict with Mills's harm principle.